Hello YouTube. It is believed that all, or maybe most, living beings on our planet are well known and studied in detail by biologists. But this is not the case. Scientists are studying only one form of life on our planet, the protein life. But there is another life which is a cluster of the physical field. You look at the sky on a clear day. It seems that it's absolutely clear. But it lives its own life, invisible to people. It is literally teeming with strange objects, visible only in the bright rays of the sun. The whole sky is filled with them. Interestingly, objects are said to move only in one direction, bottom to top, with different angles at the different speeds. The sizes of the objects are also different, but the speed of movement is very high. The flight path of objects as well as the speed with which they move made it possible to exclude the possibility that these are plant seeds or insects, and this is coming from the Russian researchers who were trying to film them not that long ago. These millions of strange objects are not visible to the human eye. Even a video camera is able to see them only if they are illuminated by the bright rays of the sun. What is it? Perhaps these are the so-called plasmoids. Plasmoids, an energetic form of life that exists on Earth in parallel with the human civilization. What are these plasmoids? This is a plasma system structured by its own magnetic field. Plasma is hot, ionized gas. An example of this is ordinary fire. Plasma has the ability to dynamically interact with the magnetic field to keep the field in itself. And the field, in turn, orders the chaotic motion of charged plasma particles. Under certain conditions, a stable but dynamic system consisting of a plasma and a magnetic field can form. There is a hypothesis that plasmoids are one of the life forms that have existed on our planet for billions of years. In Western Europe, legends have been circulating since ancient times about fires that paralyze the consciousness of a person and take him away with them. Some researchers believe that the glowing balls, spheres, may have an alien origin. People, human beings, have encountered this life since their appearance on Earth, but we still know very little about it. If human being can be called the ruler of the surface of the Earth, then, according to some Russian researchers, this non-protein life can rightly be called the rulers of the planet's bowels and the sky above. The creatures that inhabit the Earth's firmament and sometimes break out of it into the sky are called differently, but they have the same essence. In ancient times, they were considered the embodiment of the element of fire, fire elementals. Most often in historical chronicles, with these elements of fire appear as fireballs or fire spheres. There was this Roman historian, Ammianus Marcellinus, and he described the appearance of the fire elementals in the year 252 AD or Common Era. Fireballs descended from the sky and burned all the workers who were trying to restore the temple in Jerusalem. Well, I wanted to learn more because I love the history of Israel, and I found out Ammianus Marcellinus, he was born, I would say, he lived about 330, 400 AD or Common Era. He was the last of the great Latin pagan historians of antiquity. He speaks about Jews in 4 separate passages of his history. The first one refers to Pompey's conquest of Jerusalem. In the second, he quotes the disparaging remarks of Marcus Aurelius about the Jewish people, but most important is the third passage, which contains a description of the attempt of Julian the Apostate to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. He ascribes this is not due to sympathy with the Jews, but because of emperor's desire to leave a memorial to his reign. According to Marcellinus, the project was entrusted to a certain Alypius of Antioch, but it could not be executed because of an explosion of balls of fire on the Temple Mount. Well, Julian the Apostate, Flavius Claudius Julianus, who lived also in the Common Era, he was a Roman emperor, and the story is extremely interesting. But in the 20th century, descriptions of elementals looked much more mundane, but also more specific. They were even captured on video camera. For example, on September 12th at 9 o'clock in the evening, near the Russian village of Большие Удоли, Vyaznikovsky district, the car of Dmitry Regan, paranormal researcher, got stuck in the mud. Here's how the researcher himself described his encounter with a fiery creature. The fireball, sometimes moving slightly away behind low clouds, hung against the background of an almost black sky. It was about a third the size of the moon's disk, but it did not change its size. Through the optics of the TV camera, you could see its loose structure, like cells of different shapes and sizes. I calmly filmed it for about 20 minutes. Fireballs floating in the air are common on Earth, but not ubiquitous. They definitely love some areas. And in those areas, the fireballs sometimes arrange real parades. Jiguli became one of such zones favored by these fiery objects. The Jiguli Mountains, or simply Jiguli, are a range of wooded mountains located in Russia on the right bank of the Volga River, inside the Samara Band. The Jiguli are considered the only tectonically active mountains in European Russia. That's important. First having formed around 7 million years ago. The summits and other exposed areas of the Jiguli are composed of limestone and dolomite sediments laid down 230-350 million years ago in the Permian and Carboniferous periods. For several years in a row, a Samara, that's a city in Russia, group of local historians came here to collect stories of local residents about their encounters with fiery entities. Local historians were lucky. On one of the summer nights, they actually saw a real air parade over the Jiguli. Here's what one of the participants of the expedition wrote in his diary. On August 15, 1990, at about 22 hours, I, as well as several of my comrades, observed a group of fireballs flying over the Jiguli. Ahead of the group flew a large single ball with a small tail, followed by 9 smaller balls or spheres. They flew in a row of 3, shimmering with bright and long tails. Who are the fiery phenomena that frighten people? What is it? Scientists have been trying to answer this question for a long time. Many of them believe that the fire elementals do not exist, and poetic stories about meeting with strange fiery objects that behave like living beings or are inspired by ancient myth and fairy tales, or just eyewitnesses of such meetings for the first time, saw very ordinary ball lightning. That's how they explaining that what the people see in antiquity and now is just a fairly ordinary ball lightning. And they say, such scientists, that the eyes have become large from fear, meaning this fear makes people believe in all kinds of things. Here's how the Canadian professor Michael Persinger explains the appearance of fire objects, balls and pillars in the course of natural processes. From a scientific point of view, these are fire objects that frighten people. They're born underground. Even very weak tectonic movements lead to mechanical stresses. In siliceous rocks, electricity is generated, which given their huge mass, can reach a significant value. Under its influence, a column of air is ionized over this section of rocks and twists around the axis. As a result, there are lightning bolts that have sizes from a few centimeters to 1 to 2 meters. Their movement in the air are so unusual that people could easily mistake them for living things. I greatly respect the Canadian scientist. I've read him for many years, and maybe what they had seen over the tectonically active Jiguli was that. But you see, not all the appearances of fireballs can be explained by natural causes. Non-protein fire life, it seems, still exists on our seemingly well-studied Earth, and not always an encounter with this life ends only with surprise and blood-curdling stories of eyewitnesses. Russian researchers of the unknown, following academician Kaznachev, have long been talking about the possibility of the existence of beings on our planet. The basis of life for these beings, are energy fields. It is likely that the energy life forms were able to reach a high level of their development and are not predatory jellyfish floating in the oceans of air, but actually intelligent beings. In some Eastern mystical manuscripts that have come down to our time, for example, in the Ball of Fire, it is said about the existence on Earth of intelligent races that do not have a solid body, but are fire clusters. Well, they say, Russian researchers, that we must accept the idea that on Earth we really know only a protein nucleic form of life well enough, but energy beings can exist next to it. Moreover, encounters with them can end in tragedy. True, they can exist only in energetically active areas of the planet, in conditions of constant energy supply, primarily in places where powerful electromagnetic currents reach the Earth's surface. For example, in the magnetic poles of the planet. Yuri Korshunov, a member of the Soviet expedition to the South Pole, recalled about the meeting with such creatures. Well, Soviet polar explorer Yuri Korshunov lived in Leningrad. Shortly before his death, he told a journalist a story that he had kept secret for a long time. This is no wonder, because for such things in the USSR, they were forbidden. You mention it and you're put in a mental asylum. But I'm going to tell you the story, but I cannot prove the veracity of it. And until I do, I remain doubtful. But I think I need to share it, because I did tell you other things about Antarctica too. In 1959, the Soviet expedition that established the Mirny station in Antarctica sent a group of 6 explorers deep into the continent to reach the South Magnetic Pole. Only 2 of them returned. In the end, Korshunov recalled, we decided to tell the truth. What happened was too much pressure. To my surprise, they believed us. But there was no convincing evidence. So what happened in 1959? The Soviet expedition for 3 weeks, without losing a minute to repair the car, apparently it was broken, reached the South Magnetic Pole. Everything was going too well, Korshunov recalled. Troubles began for the expedition the next morning. 300 meters away from the all-terrain vehicle, a glowing ball jumped out of nowhere and began to bounce like a football. A few minutes passed, and the ball, as if seeing the polar explorers, slowly rolled towards them, turning into a kind of a sausage. The photographer of the expedition, Alexander Gorodetsky, went forward with a camera in his hand, and suddenly the sausage stretched out like a narrow ribbon. A glowing halo appeared around Gorodetsky. He screamed horribly. 2 shots rang out. The group's senior officer Andrei Skobelev and the expedition's doctor Roman Kustov They were the ones who fired. The glowing ribbon swelled, sparks flew in all directions, and it disappeared with an explosion. The photographer was dead. The back of his head, hands, and back charred. The glowing orbs reappeared on the path 2 days later. They appeared suddenly at an altitude of about 100 meters, then slowly descended, approaching the people. Kustov and Borisov started firing their rifles. When Korshunov recovered from the shock, the balloons, orbs were gone, and there was a smell of ozone in the air, as if after a severe thunderstorm. Kustov and Borisov lay dead in the snow, and the commander of the detachment, Andrei Skobelev, stood with his hands pressed to his eyes. He did not remember anything and did not see anything. The head of the detachment did not reach Mirny. He died on the way back. Plasmoids. According to one version, flying fireballs are not a hallucination of polar explorers, but special living beings. They do not consist of the usual molecules, but of clumps of energy. An American physicist in 1966 came up with the name for these fireballs, plasmosaurs or plasmoids. They live at an altitude of about 500 kilometers. From here you cannot see them, from down at the surface of the planet. But in the area of magnetic poles, it is easier for plasmoids to approach the Earth. It is believed that plasmosaurs are the oldest living things on Earth. It is simply not organic life, but an energetic substance. And academician Kazanachev in Russia assumed that this life possesses the basics of reasoning. And Russian scientist Boris Solomin suggested that plasmoids are magnetic plasma structures that are widely distributed in outer space and are formed on the sun. His article, The Experience of Reasoning About Dynamical Systems, was published in the magazine, I often mention it in my research, Technika Молодежи, number 8, 1984, which at that time was almost the only platform for authors of original ideas in the USSR. They did not fit into the generally accepted scientific ideas. The most important processes on the surface of our sunspots, flashes, have a magnetic plasma nature. When solar flares occur, plasma streams and magnetic plasma formations fly away from the sun in all directions at a speed of several hundred kilometers per second. When they reach Earth, they tend to stay in the ionosphere. The radiation belts of the Earth are a real reserve for all kinds of magnetic plasma formations of solar and even galactic origin. They may have a high degree of organization, show some signs of life, and even intelligence. They live mainly in the radiation belts of the Earth at high altitude, but they can descend along the lines of the Earth's magnetic field to the lower layers of the atmosphere, especially at those points where these lines most intensely cross the Earth's surface, in the areas of magnetic poles. Let's look at some interesting Russian cases, as well as some in other countries. In the summer of 1983, two young men went outside with a camera, intending to shoot a panorama of the village of Rождественский in the Leninsky district of the Moscow region. It was evening and the lights were on in the village. The guys took a few pictures, and when they developed the film, they were amazed. The contours of humanoid creatures appeared in the pictures as if in motion. Moreover, the images were contoured, not background. The pictures were given for examination, and the experts declared it to be optical tricks, but the negatives were not returned. So now we have some other creatures that live beyond our vision. Luciano Boccioni was president of the Italian research group GRCU, Gruppo di Ricerca Clipologica et Ufologica, I think I pronounced it right, who were based in Arenzano, Italy, and consisted of some 25 members. The group began their work in 1976 and were the third Italian UFO research group to begin instrumental research into the infrared part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and among the first actually to capture claimed entities direct from their invisible state. Boccione was also a member of the Centro Ufologico Nazionale, that's Italy's major center for such studies, and he contributed to their official magazine, Notiziario UFO. The GRCU obtained a large catalog of extensive and detailed photographic evidence of documenting the presence of possible invisible plasmatic biological forms, both in the sky and at much lower altitude. In 1979, the GRCU released much of this photographic evidence in their report, The Invisible UFO Evidence, July 1977, June 1979. This evidence consisted of 140 infrared, panchromatic, and color photographs of the most significant, instrumentally detected invisible phenomena captured by the group in the years, again, between 1977 and 1979. In 1980, Boccione released the best of the above photographic evidence in his book La Realtà Nascosta, UFO, The Hidden Reality. This is a very rare publication, and it also presents a whole range of photographic evidence gathered not just by the GRCU, but also from other West and East European sources. It has about 200 photographs, this 142-page book, both color and black and white, showing invisible, glowing, pulsating plasmatic forms, and amoeba-like possible life forms, capable of changing shape, size, density, luminosity, arrangement, and position in a split second. So, in the early 1980s in the 80s of the 20th century, that Italian scientist Luciano Boccione settled with the assistants and a lot of measuring equipment on the top of the 300-meter hill in the Arenzano area. The instruments recorded the intensity of radioactive radiation, the intensity of the electromagnetic field, and acoustic noise in different ranges. At the same time, photo and movie cameras aimed at an empty space or a clear sky, where shooting was in the invisible and infrared ranges. The result of this unusual activity became a worldwide sensation. The images showed strange, including humanoid creatures, a kind of ethereal creatures floating in the space surrounding the equipment. Boccione's colleague, Dr. Constable, gave them the common name critters. He also suggested that they have an etheric or plasma structure. Like birds, they landed and took off, followed the airlines like dolphins, hovered over large industrial complexes. During large forest fires, Boccione's equipment began to record bursts of magnetic and radiation anomalies. At the same time, infrared images showed that large amoeba-like objects were hanging over the fires. Smaller objects glided at a low altitude above the ground, approaching the recording film equipment at a distance of 4 to 6 meters, then arose, and flew away. It is curious that the invisible creatures were somehow detected by dogs, and according to their reaction, the people on duty at the scientific base managed to turn on the recording equipment in time. By the way, it was the dogs' reaction to invisible objects that allowed one American Air Force base to film strange creatures in the air that resembled griffins or the legendary thunderbirds. But I do not have details of this case. It was referenced by Russian researchers. At about the same time that the Boccione group settled on its hill, Russian scientist and writer, and I often quote him, He's a great source. His name is Valentin Psalomshikov. He conducted scientific research in the Alazani Valley in Georgia, Soviet Georgia, under the program of the Ministry of Defense of the USSR. They investigated the possibility of remote detection from the ground of electrically hazardous areas in the clouds that were not detected by other instrument methods, including radar. The measurements were carried out in the region of Schumann resonances, or ultra-low frequency electromagnetic waves, in the range of 7 to 20 Hertz. The sensors were induction coils more than a meter long, with a winding of 500,000 turns, and a core made of perma alloy, a special magnetic alloy. Mounted on a turntable, they resembled a large caliber mortar aimed directly at the zenith. Most clearly, these devices recorded signals from objects located on the continuation of the geometric axis of the coil. And then one day, these anti-aircraft guns, so to say, jokingly, began to record strange, clear signals from invisible objects, apparently slowly floating directly above them. And after a while, a similar signal was recorded by another sensor, located a few hundred meters from the first one. Sometimes such objects were isolated, but more often whole herds of invisible objects floated over the sensors, clearly recorded by electronic equipment. According to the difference in the time of fixation on the two sensors, the speed of their movement was from 10 to 60 kilometers per hour, and they often moved in the direction of the wind, but sometimes they changed the trajectory, and the second sensor no longer recorded them. To get a portrait of the invisibles, a special radar was used, working in the millimeter range of the radio waves. Unfortunately, objects moving at a low altitude above the ground was not able to fix them. But as soon as they rose to a height of, or ascended to a height of several hundred meters, various unusual structures appeared on the locator screen in the form of inclined dashes or columns, sometimes V-shaped, rotating spirals and ovals. In principle, such objects, which often appear on the screen of meteorological radars and do not correspond to anything visible, have been observed by experts for a long time. And they have a characteristic name, angel echo, or reflection from angels. Meteorologists believe that the reflectors of the radar signals are electrically charged vortex air structures. But this is only one explanation. In Russia, experiments like those conducted by the Bachone group have been conducted by the Baikul Biolocation or Dowsing Association in the years since 1993. They're now no longer active. I'm not sure if the members are even alive, but they took photos of anomalous phenomena over the geopathogenic zones in Lake Baikal on photos that are sensitive to different spectral ranges. So did the Bachone group. Above the anomalous zone, they record vertical commons, stripes, arcs, various plasmoid formations, sometimes in the form of strange birds hanging over industrial facilities and factory pipes. Sometimes they hung over the operator's head, being fixed by both, or I would say registered, both by a biolocation dowsing method and on the film in the form of infusory cells. Most researchers believe that these critters have plasma structure. Indeed, a plasma structure, if the plasma concentration in it is relatively small and its glow is not caused by a thermal glow of the neutral air component, as in ball lightning. It is completely invisible in normal daylight, this plasma. However, the plasma emits intense ultraviolet light. Traditional cameras with multi-layer glass optics do not detect ultraviolet radiation, but modern gadgets often have simple plastic optics that allow ultraviolet light to pass through, and such invisible objects are fixed on photographic film, especially color. It is too early to say anything about the nature of such objects, too little for rigorous scientific analysis of the accumulated facts. However, some researchers believe that we are dealing with an invisible form of life, including intelligent form. At the same time, they often refer to Aristotle, who argued that in addition to people and animals, as well as other forms of life known to man, there are also some invisible entities consisting of finer matter near us. There is another point of view. The film allegedly captures etheric or astral beings who have left the earthly shell, so to say, including the souls of those who had passed away. Oddly enough, the most sober idea was expressed at the turn of the 20th century by the famous researcher of anomalous phenomena, Bittner. In his book, In the Realm of the Unknown, he mentioned, "We have agreed, in view of the possibility of all kinds of hallucinations, both individual and collective, to consider only that which exists in reality, which can be verified in any physical way, that is, without the help of our senses. Such proof can be a photograph, various kinds of prints on clay, small glass or paper, a phonogram, or some real sign." So, the creatures of Baccione and other researchers fully meet this criteria. It remains to find out who or what we are dealing with. And here's an interesting case from my research files. I mention it in my books and lectures. You can find it. I think I did include on other videos. But after this disintegration of the USSR, the information about this strange phenomenon over the Lake Baikal, observed on May 17, 1964, it was declassified. Here's what is reported about this phenomenon. At about 21 hours local time, the troop of one of the anti-aircraft missile systems, they were on duty 30 kilometers west of the city of Ulan-Ude. They reported to the division's command post about an unusual crimson glow moving over Lake Baikal. In the next message, sent 10 minutes later, the senior officer of the troop notified that he saw a burning taiga, dense forest, on the eastern Baikal coast. At this time, the military personnel of all the complexes of the division had the opportunity to observe how the purple shimmering with dull highlights, the veil captures all new areas of the evening sky, moving quite quickly in the easterly direction. At 21:20, there was heavy interference with the radio, and soon communication between the divisions of the Soviet military division could only be carried out by regular wire telephone. From the northwestern tip of the Lake Baikal, a ball of fire the size of the midday sun was slowly emerging from the horizon. It was in the very center of this orange veil. It gave the impression that the ball was alive. It pulsed, subtly changing color from bright red to dark purple shades. At about 22 hours, the bloody mist, the source of the radiation of which, as can be assumed, was that mysterious ball, turned into intense fiery flashes that engulfed both the sky and the taiga. At 22:30, when the flaming haze reached the location of the division, the commander ordered his subordinates to immediately take shelter in the sealed cabins of the facility and turn on the autonomous life support systems. As soon as the task was completed, that anomaly covered the position of the army unit. It engulfed them. According to eyewitnesses, a sudden feeling of fear and depression seized the soldiers. Many of them began to have headaches, joint and stomach aches. Some experienced diarrhea. At the same time, the windows of the cabins were tightly closed, and the flames began to dance like tongues of flame. Only at 3:30 in the morning the fog cleared, and the fireball disappeared in the east over the horizon, and at the same time the troops felt relieved. The incident was witnessed by the inhabitants of dozens of settlements located on the shores of Lake Baikal. So a resident of the local village, Stepan Pustovalov, said that about 2 hours before the mysterious fog appeared, the animals that were walking in the backyard of his house hid in the barn, and the dog, breaking off the chain, ran into the house and hid in the corner between the sofa and the wardrobe. Ilya Makhnachev from the village of Buguldeika recalled that in the first moments when the red haze appeared, the radio suddenly went silent in their house and the electrical wiring caught fire. Many residents of the village of Davshe, who were looking with interest at the fireball floating in the sky, noticed flames on the roofs of their houses, which caused a considerable stir among the villagers. Fortunately, it was only the appearance of a fire. In Goryachinsk, with the appearance of a strange red-hot object in the sky, all available automotive equipment failed. 12 tractors, 10 trucks, and a German trophy motorcycle. And, unfortunately, a passenger car of the chairman of the collective farm. In addition, almost in all localities adjacent to Lake Baikal, on the night of May 17-18 of that year, there were power outages and telephone communications were disrupted, and the telegraph did not work. In a number of villages, a real panic arose. Someone thought that the taiga was burning. Some passed on rumors about the outbreak of war. That's how they talked to each other. On that restless night, no one was able to explain to the frightened residents what was really happening. A ufologist from the city of Irkutsk, Dmitry Peretkov, who was involved in the Baikal case investigation, that 1964 case, is sure that such an anomaly is directly related to the issue of extraterrestrial civilizations. According to Peretkov, the balls of spheres represent a special plasma form of life that exists in the near stellar regions of the galaxy with very high temperatures. For unknown reasons, these living plasmoids came to our planet. Someone else agrees with the opinion of the Irkutsk ufologist. Gundarin, according to whom the miracle that he observed on Lake Baikal in his youth did not look at all like the usual natural phenomena, and most likely had some kind of intelligence that is inaccessible to human understanding. So that's where we are. We may be sharing our planet with other life forms that are very different from us. I have yet to tell you about another strikingly different life form and about cases virtually unknown outside of the Russian borders. And we're not speaking about plasmoids, but that will come later. I thank you for your attention. If you can support my research, please see the description in the links to this video. And please tell others about my channel. I really want more people to know about the Russian, Eurasian, and Chinese paranormal phenomena. I thank you for your attention.